And we're live.
All righty. It's May 9th, 2022. This is the Old Farm District Neighborhood Association monthly board meeting. Our agenda is posted on our newsletters. If you do not have or subscribe to the newsletters, go to oldfarmbend.com and sign up. We've got a couple of interesting topics this evening. First off, if we can get the board to introduce themselves. Like I said, my name is James DeRofi. I'm the board chair. Dave, why don't we just go down the ranks?
I'm Dave Johnson, and I have been vice chair for a long time. I'm looking for a replacement there, as well as working on a replacement for my NLA role.
I'm Karen Johnson, land use chair.
Jen Sawyer, community outreach.
I'm Brian Kennedy. Austin.
And we have Dirk as well, but he is possibly flying back from Europe as we speak. We also are fortunate enough to have City Councilor Kebler join us in these meetings, and she will be giving us a presentation shortly. And for land use, because land use is so active on the southeast side of town, we've been trying to post everything to the website as well as do updates. But our land use chair, Karen, if she has anything specifically that she would like to point out, she will be doing that shortly. And unfortunately, at the exact same time as this meeting, the Planning Commission is meeting regarding Stevens Road Tract, which is a very large piece of land getting annexed in or going to be annexed into the urban growth boundary and city limits. If people have questions or concerns about that, they can watch that meeting, and it will be going to discussion for the city council over the next, I think, 6 weeks. There'll be 2 meetings regarding that. To start off, just a quick update. We are going to be doing our a large general meeting gathering party at Alpenglow Park. We have been working with Parks and Rec. They have asked that we officially change it, the opening, to now July 15th, which is a Friday. It's going to be from 4:30 to 8:30. There'll be live music, all kinds of activities, tables set up, lots of fun, any family friendly. It'll be a good time. Come on down. We will continue to give you more information on that as we learn it ourselves. And before we hear from Melanie, we are gracious enough to have Rachel Zakim, or I probably butchered your last name, who happens to work with public transit in this area, and lives in our area.
Hello. I just figured since I was on here, I could share an update about the new routes that have been pushed off due to many things that started with COVID. But we have officially put out a request for bid for the construction of these stops, and we are hoping to construct them this summer. So as long as we have some bids, we will be moving forward. So it's a good thing. The other holdup is that we are still experiencing our driver shortage. So if we do not have enough drivers and the stops are built, we will not be able to start the service until we have the drivers. So get the word out if you know anybody who wants to drive for us that we are hiring. That's it.
So do you have enough buses?
Buses? Yes.
Maybe we can sell a bus and raise the driver's pay. I don't know.
We have raised it twice in the past year, and it is now at $20 an hour starting. Higher depending on your experience, but we are doing what we can.
And where should somebody go? Is that Cascade East Transit or Central Oregon? Okay.
Either of those will take you to hiring stuff. And also our contractor MTM, who is in charge of our fixed route and bend, those drivers. and our rec services as well. They are also hiring drivers.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Rachel. So now we're going to go to Councilor Kebler. For those of you that do not know, the city of Bend has been trying to figure out how to deal with houselessness and certain shelter code updates. So Melanie, since we are just now finally getting to the stage of the council hearing about it and all sorts of public town forums and that kind of stuff, tell us what you know, and afterwards we'll take questions from the audience.
Yeah, so at our meeting last week, we had the first public hearing at the council level on the code changes. We had previously had a work session with staff where we gave them some feedback and ideas, and that was after it had gone through planning commission. And I think they actually spent 3 different meetings deliberating on the code before they pushed it up to us. And in the presentation link that's in the chat, you can see what the staff presented at our meeting last week, which I think provides some good background and also shows some of the changes that have happened to the code as it went through planning commission and then as it came to us last week. So what this code does is sets the standards and the baseline for different types of shelter and how and where they can be built in Bend. In the presentation, and I'm not going to do the whole presentation. You guys can read it for background information, but there are already state laws in effect that allow shelter to be sited anywhere in the city. And so without any sort of code or guidelines or anything, really except for what's in the bill. So this code is actually a lot more comprehensive as far as what we're going to be requiring, how we're defining each type of shelter, what type of density and things can be allowed for different types of shelter. So we, just to describe the meeting last week, we had a public hearing, which means we hear from staff. We ask them any questions we have, and then we have the public testify. And we were in the municipal court building, which is right next to the police station over here on the east side. So it's a nice big room full of folks, and at least 30 people, I think, testified. We also had people on Zoom who were testifying. So we sort of did 3 people in front of us talk, and then 3 people talk virtually, and then kind of back and forth, and got through quite a few people over a couple hours to put their comments into the record. And then, of course, anything that was emailed to us is also part of the record as well. So once we heard from everyone, we then deliberated on it and suggested a few changes. We heard a lot of people talking about the 24-hour on-site supervision and management, which is a change that we made. It had been written as on-site, 24/7 on-site or on-call management, and we took out the or on-call. So there always needs to be somebody designated on-site to manage the site. We talked about, and we heard a lot of input about the hardship shelter, which was basically taking, we already have in our code what's called a medical hardship permit that you can get if someone is having a medical hardship or maybe needs to stay in an RV near the hospital while they're going through a procedure or something. You can actually right now go and get a permit from the city to let them park an RV or to live temporarily on your property. Our staff sort of took that concept and tried to think about how do we expand that to allow community members who might want to host somebody in an RV or in a temporary, living situation on their own property. And the code was developed with all these restrictions around, you have to apply for the permit, you have to make sure there's no dumping, you have to have this and this hookups, you have to have this and this bathroom available, etc. And there would be time limits on it. And there was a lot of work on that. How do we get this right? How is it going to work for a neighborhood? And ultimately, council had some concerns about if this was the right tool for that job. We already have a safe parking program that like churches and businesses and other institutions can use and are using to host people in their parking lots, oftentimes with a porta potty or access to a bathroom. Services come there, people get moved into housing, somebody else comes to park in their parking lot. And so ultimately, council agreed to sort of take that hardship shelter permit out of this code that we're going to be moving forward with, and to think about it some more, see if there's some other options for community members who are looking to help. Can we make it easier to stick an ADU on your property? Can we find some way to help get the safe parking program expanded to more properties, things like that. I did have a question with the hardship permit of how many people would actually use it. Because with our medical hardship permit, like hardly anyone does. Over the years, we really haven't seen that many people use it. And then we also had a hardship available for people who had fled from the Labor Day fires, and nobody applied to do that permit. So either, people don't, it could be people didn't know, it could be a lack of knowledge of the program, or it could be that it's just too onerous. It doesn't fit how people want to help other people. And so we didn't move forward with that part of the code. We've taken that out. And I think the 24-hour management was the other big change that we made. The Planning Commission had already made some changes. And in this presentation, when you scroll into the back half of the presentation, you'll see some red words, which show kind of where Planning Commission and staff had already made some suggested changes that we kept about good neighbor guidelines, about notification to BPRD, Bend Pine School District for outdoor shelters, and also to neighborhood associations, which we added that language in at the meeting last week as well, so that there's notification that goes out for certain types of these shelters that are already being required to talk to the Parks District and School District. And I think those were the biggest changes we made. I mean, the biggest one was just stepping back from that hardship housing and saying, hey, maybe this isn't the right tool, or we haven't quite got it right yet, and let's keep thinking about that while moving forward with the rest of the shelter types and the code that had been developed through the Planning Commission. And then we sort of tweaked it at our meeting as well. So the other thing that came up a lot in the comments was that we were receiving from people was like, well, how are you going to pay for this, and what's the budget? And this is not us actually proposing to build a shelter. This is setting the landscape for people who own private property to propose building a shelter if they would like to. Someone like a Central Oregon Villages, former Chief Jim Porter was there, speaking in support of this code, also speaking in support of 24-hour management, which we did do. So this is just this is not an active project in any particular place. This is setting the standards across the city so other people can develop shelter, and hopefully will move forward with developing more shelter than we've seen developed in the past, which is part of the reason that we're in the situation we're in. So I can answer questions as best I can. If there's a technical question I can't answer, I'll help find you the answer later as much as possible. And then, yeah, the next step on this is, because we asked for some changes to the code, the staff didn't want to make changes on the fly and then have us adopt it. So we're coming back for our first reading at our next meeting. It will be potentially a little bit more deliberation if there's any other little details we need to finish up, but I expect us to move forward with the first reading at the next meeting, and then a second reading at whatever the meeting is after that, where a second reading would go. So there we go.
Okay, that was a good update. Thank you. Let's, do we have any questions? If you do have a question, raise your hand or turn your camera on if you're in the audience. Karen, of course, you have a question.
Karen.
Are you going to require that all shelters be 24/7? And if you are not, where are the residents going to go during the day?
So I don't think there is a requirement for the, I'll have to look, Karen. I don't think there's a requirement for the shelters that we say you have to be open 24/7. And for example, like the smoke shelter, emergency shelter, or cooling at First Presbyterian during the heat wave, they were not 24/7. They were trying to help people during the day, because we know we do have actually our overnight shelter that doesn't let people stay there during the day most of the time. So I don't think there's a requirement for 24/7 that they be open. We have the requirement that there's 24/7 management. So anytime they're open, there needs to be management there, either if they're open all the time or not. And separately from this, Karen,
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, separately from this, Karen, we are moving through the process of getting the navigation center built at the 2nd Street shelter, which is actually a day center, right? A place people can be during the day, because we are lacking that for sure. We need a permanent place for people to go during the day, receive services, get their mail, talk to counselors, whatever it is they need to do, so that they are not just kind of booted out during the day from the shelter. Yep.
The problem that people are concerned about is that if you're going to put shelter in residential neighborhoods, the code should provide that it be 24/7. That is the main objection to the shelter code.
Provide what should be, I guess I'm not understanding, Karen, like,
It should, well, okay, it should provide that the shelter be open for services 24/7. What people are concerned about is when the shelter, for example, closes for the morning, where are the residents that were in it going to go? What they're frankly concerned about, and I've heard some examples, neighbor lives next to a station or a shelter, and you have some fellow squatting on your lawn and defecating. What do you do then? What is the remedy for this? And if the shelter is closed during the day, they have no place to go. So why won't they just hang around the neighborhood?
yeah, there's no requirement in here that a shelter operate like a navigation center, which is what you're asking. So we're not doing that. We have 3 types of shelter, which is outdoor shelters, group shelters, and multi-room shelters. The group shelters is most similar to a congregate shelter where everyone's in one room together. And the outdoor shelters are more like the tiny villages, and the multi-room shelter is more like a Bethlehem Inn or a converted motel. So I don't, I mean, I think that would be part of the good neighbor agreement that all of them are required to have, as far as if people are not allowed to be inside during part of the day, what's the agreement with where they're going to go? And we heard from John Boyce, I think is I can't remember his last name right now. He operates the Shepherd's House shelter, and he talked about how they work with their neighbors to make sure people aren't hanging around and causing trouble when they're not in the shelter, including, right, if somebody who's a neighbor of the Second Street shelter trespasses someone, gets to the point where they need to trespass someone from their property, the Second Street shelter will also trespass them and be like, you've now lost your privilege to be in this shelter. And that's part of the good neighbor agreement. So one of the themes of this meeting is that we have incredible service providers that are the people that run these shelters, and that we have trust in them to understand how to run the shelter in the best way to serve their clients. And drawing the ire and rancor of the neighbors is not something they ever want to do, because that will not help them serve their clients, for sure.
But where will people go if the shelter is closed? Do you have any control over the residents? If the shelter is closed, the management is not there, and in residential neighborhoods, someone starts seriously misbehaving. At one of the public meetings, the answer was, call the police. Most people think that is not a very good answer.
Okay, Karen, Councilor Kebler, I guess that will just be, we shall see. I know, Melanie, you didn't make it to it, but the neighborhood associations helped set up 2 town halls that discussed this issue. Just so you know, we are going to be trying to have more town halls regarding current issues affecting Bend in the future. If you have any suggestions or corrections, things that you'd like to see or that we did, they seem to be, the ones we held were quite functional. They were at Caldera High School. If people do not know, that is an amazing new high school with an amazing auditorium. I was shocked. I did not realize it was a lot nicer than my high school. That's all I've got to say.
It's a very nice school. Yeah.
Anybody else in the audience? Questions regarding sounds like the finalization of the shelter code.
Councilor Kebler, I did have a question around the language that you used around the hardship shelter, about whether that's worthy of reviving in a different form. What is your take on that? I mean, you've had the deliberations, there's been many months of conversation around that. Is that thing shelved or is it backburnered?
I would say more it's backburnered. We were already gonna be having a conversation, a work session around how to get more affordable housing quicker, and ADUs were going to be part of that discussion. And I know they don't seem like they go together, but they kind of do. Like, if you could continue living in your home and then have another part of your property available for someone else to live on, and how can I mean, part of the idea of the hardship permit was like allow someone to do that kind of on a temporary basis to help somebody out It's not a short-term rental. It's not a landlord-tenant thing. It's just maybe someone has a family member, maybe someone knows somebody that they met that has lost their housing and they want to allow them to live on their piece of property. I didn't think many people would use it the way that we had sort of worked it up as this hardship permit with a lot of these requirements. And then we were also looking at some neighborhoods have CC&Rs that you cannot park an RV in a driveway, no matter what, living in it or not, you're not allowed to do that, or you're not allowed to even have it in front of your house. And so then we were thinking, well, then is it not even going to be available in many neighborhoods in the city? We were looking at, well, then we're going to have to maybe think about a buffer so that they're not all concentrated on one block. And it became a little overworked. Like that we thought of this as like a way for people to help people quickly. And it became a big kind of process that I didn't think people were going to use it that way. So that's kind of my reasoning, my personal reasoning on thinking maybe we should take this off and think about it some more before coming back to it.
As a follow-up to that, did the city or has the city ever ascertain what percentage of the households in Bend are or would be protected by those protective CC&Rs?
No, we asked staff that. We don't have that number readily available, and it's not easy to find. It basically involves going through every deed in the city and seeing where the CC&Rs are. And then you got to find out, is there even an HOA? Is that HOA even going to enforce it? It's not something that our staff has spent time compiling. But I know that it is definitely an issue, and I didn't want to ignore it. So we don't know for sure.
Do you think the city would need that data before proceeding with a potential next iteration?
Maybe, yeah, I would like to know more about if we can even get a rough idea of how much of the city might be restricted, because we can't override that private covenant.
Right.
So you have to let an RV park in your driveway. So
Do you think there's perceived issues of maybe an equality status if, let's say, half the community does have those protective CC&Rs and the other half doesn't?
right, yeah.
From a city standpoint, does it feel like that would be equitable to allow hardship shelters that are not allowed in half of the city?
Yeah, and it just doesn't seem like it would be effective. It wouldn't be an effective policy if there was wide swaths of the city where you couldn't even use it. Even if you wanted to, I want to help somebody, I want to let someone park their RV in my driveway, I'm cool with that, and you can't even do it even though the city allows it. So I think there were still a lot of questions about that, which is part of the discussion that we had.
And can I break into this? We could turn this whole meeting into houselessness, and there are other issues that as an NA that we want to address with city council. Can I, we could turn this whole meeting into houselessness.
Dave, let's just ask the audience if there's anybody with a question for Councilor Kebler. If any of the board has questions, we can email her. Anybody in the audience?
Anne has her hand up.
Anne.
Hello. I wanted to know if you could address the issue of the short-term rentals, because I know that's getting a lot of chatter lately, and a lot of the community is wondering why there is not some kind of a halt being put to new applications, a curtailing of any new ones, possibly rolling back some of the existing ones to free up additional housing for the people who want to live here on a permanent basis. Can you speak to anything new on that?
So Anne, I don't know, did you see the presentation staff gave us? Gosh, maybe it was a couple months ago now, with the data on our short-term rentals. If not, I can send that. And then we are having a work session, I believe at our next meeting. Let me double check it, but I believe either at our next meeting or the meeting after, a work session to follow up on our previous discussion where staff is bringing us back some of the things we suggested around tweaking our STR policy.
Oh, so, okay, excellent. No, I did not see what you were referring to.
Okay, yeah, I'll find a link to that presentation because it has some really good data about just how many there are and all of that stuff.
And then you say you'll be discussing it at,
yeah, I'll find that out too. And let me look. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience?
On what? On what issue?
Well, that was a short-term rental question, Dave. That wasn't a houses question. So at this point, we can open up the meeting to particular questions to Councilor Kebler that she may be able to answer. And Melanie, just so you know, there's we all heard the news today that Mayor Russell is stepping down. The chat is been very active. The news is taking it on. So I think Dave may have a question for you about that. Some of us, others might as well. But let Dave ask his question first. And yeah,
Let me start, JD. Okay, I have not talked to the mayor yet, so my
Okay.
comments are going to be pretty limited. I'm just going to
Okay.
let people know that.
okay.
Okay, but I have a concern that has come up in the NLA several times. It's been the opinion of many of us, including the chair, that the NA board should train and choose the NLA rep successor. Lots of reasons, but the biggest is knowledge of the NA and knowledge of the board experience. The process worked really well in Aubrey Butte. Hans Jurgensen had his replacement shadow him, like I've been doing with Ross, and the succession in Aubrey Butte was seamless. Now, I don't know what kind of deal Hans made with Sally, so that that his trained successor could be appointed without having three candidates and a whole lot of interviews, and especially with people who have no real deep understanding of what the board does, what the board has been doing, and what's important in the NA. But I would really like, I've been having Ross shadow me, and I would really like to figure out a way where we can present Ross as my replacement and just have the mayor sign off on that without a whole bunch of rigmarole, and have as seamless a transition with Old Farm as Aubrey Butte had.
Okay. I hear you.
Okay.
Melanie, I think Dave's concern is, and since you did just announce that you haven't talked to Sally basically was the council member for the NLA.
Well, she has the appointment power for all of our committees. So the mayor ultimately gets to decide how appointments happen.
Yeah, that's basically why he's trying to ask that question. And then I guess we'll have to figure out how to do it in what, eight days.
Yeah, I mean, we're so people know the process. Our charter says if there's a vacancy in the mayor's office specifically, that council first turns to the councilors and see if we can appoint one of the councilors before going to a wider appointment process. If we appoint a councilor into the mayor's position, that of course leaves a vacancy in that councilor's spot, and then there needs to be appointment there. So I cannot tell you how that process is going to play out yet. Again, this just happened today, and I haven't talked to Sally. I mean, I will say the NLA is the only committee I'll say that has this sort of this tradition of how you do that. It's different than every other committee we do, where we always, the mayor asks for applications, interviews people, etc. So, but I can't tell you how that's going to play out at this point.
Okay, I just wanted my concern to be noted.
Got it.
And Councilor Kebler, I have a question. It came up in the last city council meeting, sort of for the citizen committees, and this isn't a citizens committee. Neighborhood associations are a volunteer organization. But what is can you explain briefly this stipend that was discussed? Did that pass? And what was how did that, from what I understand, there was only one committee that was even an issue with. I'd love to hear the history on that.
Yeah, we tasked our diversity, equity, and inclusion director. I think she's actually just the equity and inclusion director, with taking a look at that policy with the idea of making committee work in general maybe a little more accessible for people that might have childcare expenses when they attend meetings, or other, missed hour work or something like that. So we had a discussion about that at the meeting prior to the last one, and basically because of federal income tax rules and some other rules about volunteers, which are our committee members officially are, you can get up to $500 a year maximum. And I think we set like $40 a meeting or something like that. And that will be available to every one of our permanent advisory committees, and any committee member can opt out and say, I don't need or want that stipend. And that was after looking at some other cities that had started stipend programs and had looked at helping to compensate some of the expenses of their committee members to encourage hopefully more people of different walks of life, whatever, to apply for committees and not have to worry as much about the time commitment. We're piloting it, so we'll check back in on it and see if everybody opted out, nobody wanted a stipend, we can look at that, but that's where we're at right now.
Okay. Looks like we've got 2 hands up. Diane.
It's question time now.
Yeah, sorry, Melanie. I kind of knew this was going to happen, but I don't know what the questions are. Just so you know, they're all new to me too. So,
that's fine.
Diane.
Just had a question on how the interim mayor will be selected. Will it be the mayor pro tem will move into that role, or how's that going to work?
The council as a group selects. Yeah. So I anticipate we'll be talking about that at our next meeting.
Does that answer your question, Diane?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Ann?
Yeah, I just had one quick question, and I don't know if Melanie can address this or not. At the beginning of the last meeting, I guess that was during the work session, when the gentlemen were talking about the changes to the north corridor of the 97. I think I heard them say quite clearly, there's no intention of adding a 3rd lane. They're not going to be expanding the 97. Did you hear it that way? So
yeah.
Well, my question is, it looks like they are going to do that as you travel north on the 97. I know it's out of the city limits, but it does appear that they're, moving to widen it. So I was just wondering what that is going on up there.
Yeah, there's a couple different projects going on. So between Bend and Redmond, there's a project going on, and then the north corridor inside of Bend, right all around that Cooley, Roble, the mall up there, the Target, everything. That's a separate project. So, Ann, I'll try to put links to both projects in here. I know that on the 97 between Bend and Redmond, they're adding some deceleration lanes, which is adding a lane to the highway, I believe, at some of the intersections. So that may be what you're looking at, but I can also just give you the ODOT contact. Like if you want to get the real nitty gritty detail, you can send it right to them. For the North Corridor project, they're actually making 97 come all the way around and connect to the Parkway, and making the street that goes by, Best Buy and everything will not be a Parkway connected street anymore. It's really a huge project. So let me put a couple more links in the chat, and then if you want to follow up with ODOT, they're the best source of information on exactly what is going to be happening on 97.
Great, thank you.
I wanted to make sure that Susie's question from the chat got answered. There is great concern about the potential gas station build at Brosterhous and Murphy Rd, given that more studies are being asked for by the planning person. Can we be assured that an issue with this much opposition come before the city council?
So because it's a land use application, and I think it's still in pre-application status. I don't know, Karen, if you know, but this only comes to us in certain contexts, depending on what type of application it is, depending on sometimes if there's an appeal. So I can't really opine on it because it might come to me and I might have to sit as sort of a neutral decider on an application. But I think it obviously, I think everyone's aware of it. I see the sign every time I drive over the Murphy Bridge, right? Like it's definitely got a high amount of public awareness about this project. So as it moves through the process, as long as people keep paying attention to it, no matter what, there will be opportunities to put your comments into the record. And then, I can't advise people on what to do outside of that, but there's definitely opportunities that this could potentially come before council at some point.
Jen, were there any other questions in the?
Sorry, James, can I just have a follow-on question to that?
Yeah, hi, Councilor Kebler. Sara Moss, I think, is one of the people that's pushing the no to the gas station.
Sarah, you can ask. I don't know if I can answer.
Pushing, I don't know.
I don't know the right word. I'm sorry.
I know. I was trying to think of a nice organizing. Thanks. That
Organizing.
sounds way better. just a quick question. I noticed that you all passed on hearing the library land use case. I was just wondering, do you have any insights in terms of how the council decides whether to make a decision or, appeal or deny a permit, like hear it or move it onto LUBA?
Yeah, it can really depend. The library thing was a totally different type of decision, actually. There was actually at our last meeting an appeal on a subdivision plan where a hearings officer had made a decision, and one of the parties had asked council if we would take the appeal, and we decided no, we will let LUBA, we're not going to take that. LUBA can hear it if they want to appeal it to LUBA. But there are some nuances depending on what type of application it is and exactly the posture of if it went to a hearings officer yet or not. So I can't really tell you exactly the procedure because it can be really dependent, but there are a lot of mechanisms of ways to appeal certain land use decisions that happen even at the lower hearings officer levels.
So
Yeah.
maybe our next step is to really just ask the city planner what that future looks like for that permit. Okay. Thank you so much.
Since Melanie's being so kind, are there any other questions from the audience? Okay, I'm not seeing any, but onto the agenda, or back to the agenda, we did have a comment about, or we told everybody to pay attention to the Stevens Road tract. We mentioned this earlier. So the Planning Commission is meeting on that as we speak. It is a very unusual land use concept. It's from a state legislation. I myself am curious as to how it's going to go. I'm not going to bother Councilor Kebler's time with it because it truly is a state legislation thing that the city of Bend is going to have to deal with. I do encourage everybody to follow it. It is a massive 270 or so acres of land that's going to be everything. And it will affect the entire southeast side of town, no question. If anybody else has anything to say on that, Karen, you're our land use chair. Is there anything that we should add to the Stevens Tract public hearing?
Well, in this sense, I read the proposal. They have three options or alternatives, they call them. I like number 3 because it has the most housing. The Stevens Ranch tract is going to have a lot of industrial, commercial, light commercial, and to encourage walkability, I like to see the maximum number of houses as possible go on the Stevens tract. So I'd vote for option 3. I think people should read the options, alternatives they call them, and speak up if you have an opinion on which one you think should be good.
And if people do have an opinion, basically you just have to submit it to the city councilors or the planning commission, and it all gets forwarded through. We do have the link on our website. Brian, if you could briefly give us an update on the bed and beautification cleanup, that would be great.
Yeah, I can be brief. Weather. We had a very intimate group. Thank you, Liz. And there were 3 of us who went out and braved the weather and managed to do a decent cleanup along a significant section of Pearl and Badger Road. So we appreciate the folks that did show up, and we encourage everyone to think first Thursdays of the month. We will be meeting at 9 a.m. We hope to have those posted on the website in the near future so that people can maybe actively schedule themselves into those, since we know when they will be through the first week of October. We will be doing those rain or shine. So it was successful. Hopefully we can grow it and cover more areas of the old farm in subsequent cleanups.
So it's a volunteer cleanup, whether or not the weather is good.
Yeah, I got a show, so you got a show. Sorry.
Okay. And Melanie, I think it's been successful. This is our second one now that we've done this year.
Cool.
Yeah.
So where do I see what did you say, the first Thursday?
Yeah, first Thursday, 9 a.m. And Diane Holmes is coordinating this, does the bulk of the work in scouting our next locale. And then we seek volunteers prior to each event and finish the coordination and notify those folks who've indicated that they'll be joining us, the wheres and whens specifically. But for anybody who would like to participate, it will always be the first Thursday starting at 9 a.m. And with growth, I know Diane would like to add additional events. I know she's discussing the opportunity, and Diane, I believe you're on there. If you want to chime in, I think she has some thoughts around the let's pull together. So Diane, did you want to go off on that?
Sure. I mean, I'm willing to try and get an event for May 21st. It's a Saturday, and it's during the citywide Let's Pull Together. We'd have to get the message out probably to everybody, I would say, who signed up to volunteers. What I would suggest, if there's interest in me pursuing that, I will try to get together with Ross, I guess, to get a message out to everybody.
Did you get any feedback from the city about Reed Market, whether that was in play? As I know we had. Oh,
I thought you had done that, so I haven't contacted Daryl.
Well, I know the local businesses had done a cleanup on that a couple of weeks ago. Given it's Reed Market, it probably will need a cleanup again. But certainly, if we had some idea of where we can do this work, then I think Ross and Dirk can help us get the message out to the entire database of folks who could participate regardless of what day of the week it was. So I think that might be a good place to start.
Okay, well, maybe you and I can get together and kind of hammer out the details, and then we can ask Ross to send something out.
And for those listening, we provide all supplies, gloves, trash bags, things like that. You literally just have to show up. And Diane, would you say it's about an hour and a half someone's time?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, just a blip in the.
You don't even touch anything.
Yeah,
grabbers too.
Gloves, grabbers, bags, and vests. So they're all set out. And I will say the grabbers are really effective. We picked up a lot of broken glass, acrylic material. Looked like a couple of sheets went off a truck and covered a huge distance. And I'll tell you what, those things can pick up pennies and cracks of glass. And so I think we did a pretty good job. And I think the biggest item we got this time was a ceiling fan. So
a ceiling. Okay.
Yeah, we got a little collection of interesting things that populate our roadways from time to time. So yeah, we got that one out of there.
So I guess a good follow-up is if you're driving around town, please don't litter and cover your load if you're going to the landfill.
Cover your load. Please don't throw your cigarettes out the window.
And I just have a quick comment that I'm going to let Jen finish. But as everybody knows, it's been raining, it's springtime, and there is a possibility that the pollinators might be in your yard. So Jen, you've been pushing this message by way of email. Can you please tell us why we should not be scared of our little bumblebees?
Well, it is swarm season. Swarm season is the birthing of new honeybee colonies. What happens is the mother queen starts producing eggs as the weather gets warm, and then the colony starts to expand in size. It gets too tight inside the cavity, and the mother queen leaves with about a third of the existing colony. During this time, it's called a swarm, and it looks like a cloud of thousands of bees, and the queen will land somewhere, and the worker bees and some of the drones will swarm in a cluster around her to protect her. And what they're doing is they are waiting to find a new dwelling, which they do via sending out scout bees to go try and locate a new dwelling. And the scout bees come back and they do a dance and try to get the cluster excited about the site that they found. And the one with the most excitement, they go off to that location. Swarm season lasts about 4 to 6 weeks. It's an extraordinary sight to see. They are relatively docile when they're in this cluster formation. However, I would not recommend messing with them. What you can do is you can either call a beekeeper, and that beekeeper will come and collect the bees for you. I am able to do this as well. Or you can just let them be. They'll move along in about 2 or 3 days. But one of the things, the misconception about how to save the bees is actually obtaining a hive. The real true way to save bees is stopping the use of pesticides and harsh fertilizers and planting more floral diversity. So I don't exactly encourage people to obtain a colony within the UGB due to the lack of habitat and pesticide usage. And there's just not enough flora for them to maintain their health. It takes approximately 2 million flowers for them to produce 1 pound of honey. So we are absolutely lacking, but 'tis the season, the swarm season. And because of our weather, I actually think swarm season might go into the middle of June. So just be aware.
Okay. On that note, I have a question for Councilor Kebler, unrelated. I know we're in a drought situation again. I know it's normally a governor issued statement and all the counties sort of do it on their own. Exactly what is any recommendations or comments from city council or regarding this? I mean, everybody knows about it, but what do we really need to know?
Yeah, I think the water wise stuff and the water reduction stuff goes out with people's utility bills this time of year, especially as people are turning on your sprinklers. And one thing to remember, which maybe people, hopefully everyone here knows, but some people might not, is that you're supposed to water every other day maximum. You're not supposed to be watering every day. And you can set your system to do that. It's possible. So that's one big thing. But most of the water within the city, so the city itself in our area is not the largest user of water. The biggest user of water is agriculture. But within the city, irrigation is where most of the water goes these months. Not, you're flushing your toilet or taking a shower or whatever. So whatever you can do to reduce your irrigation, planting different types of lawn, not having a lawn, planting xeriscape, planting flora, right? Planting things that are more native and don't need as much water is really helpful. On the policy side, we did make a change to our master water plan. I think that's what it's called. Master water plan, water master plan. And to kind of sync up with some state regulations and make it a little more clear when we do need to issue water curtailment, which is like, hey, don't, you got to stop watering your lawn because of the drought that we're in at this point in the summer, or other, issue missives to people on the city water to lower their water usage. So, and we may see that this summer. We can also do our own local water emergency on top of what the governor's already done to allow us to, for instance, tell all of our city properties what to do with water, and as well as people on city water within the city. So yeah, it's definitely coming our way. We're still in a drought. Even with the extra snowpack we're getting, it's still going to be really, really dry summer.
It's definitely a problem for the entire West Coast. Jen.
Something that other people can do as well to help save on water is, instead of having turf, is they can do what's called meadowscaping. You can intersow meadow flowers within your turf. I mean, the HOAs may or may not allow it, but whatever at this point. But you can intersow. There's a lot of very great drought tolerant flowers that intersow quite nicely with turf. And it's quite beautiful. So you can do a 1-2 chop situation of reducing your water usage and increasing floral diversity for pollinators. Native pollinators need it too.
Okay, I just noticed, or I just looked at our newsletter to make sure I wanted to cover everything. There is a large public land use meeting called for the Shiloh development on Murphy Road. Our information is on our website, but it's May 18th at 5:30. It is the Murphy Road Country Club area, 567 homes. So the information is there. So please go look. We try to do our best to make sure everybody does know what's going on in the area, so you're not surprised. It is right on our border. It's technically on the border of Old Farm and Southeast Bend. I don't have anything else to add, so I'm going to ask if any board member has anything to add. If I do not hear any board members, then I'm going to ask for public comments. And If there are none of those, then I will move to finalize the meeting. So board, do we have anything else we need to discuss that we have not? I'm getting unanimous head shakes. Audience, do we have anything else that you would like to discuss or comment on that the neighborhood association may be able to help you with? Getting no response. If that is the case, Councilor Kebler, thank you for attending. Everybody, thank you for attending. If you have anything, or Old Farm Bend, Brian, you were getting ready to say something? No?
No, I'm
All
good.
right. Then I say we adjourn this meeting, and we are 8 minutes ahead of schedule. So Ross, if you can cancel the live recording on YouTube.
Will do.